Coming up on this edition of VCU In Depth, documentaries from students in VCU's Robertson School of Media and Culture.
We'll start by taking a look at Richmond's thriving thrift store market.
And then we'll show you a classic documentary about Richmond's counterculture scene in the 70s and 80s.
VCU In Depth begins right now.
Good evening, and welcome to VCU In Depth. I'm Autumn Wright.
And I'm Calvin Weinstein. Thanks for joining us as we feature documentaries from undergraduate students in VCU's Robertson School of Media and Culture. As Richmond continues to grow, there's no surprise that there's over 100 thrift stores throughout the Richmond area. With thrift culture growing, they have become very prominent.
Many of these thrift stores offer a hand-picked and curated selection of vintage, one-of-a-kind items that can only be found in their stores. Our next documentary, Thrifted, takes a look at two unique thrift stores that are both valuable to the city.
Defining thrifting. The action of buying secondhand goods. We're using it as an action word. But I also think thrift culture, though, is I think can be a mix of many reasons why people want to thrift. It started out because people didn't have a lot of money and they wanted to get decent things for an affordable price. So we are Mamer Sass Reinvented Fashions, and we rescue and reinvent unwanted textiles and vintage clothing. Well, when I was a kid, they called me Mamer, and it was just a family nickname. I was Mamie, Jamie, Mamie, Mamer Sass. So when I started out, I actually started doing jewelry, repurposed jewelry, and when I was trying to come up with a name, that just was like, okay, maybe Mamer Sass. So then when we joined up, I was like, all right, well, would you want to change the name? He's like, no. But going back, I'm originally from Maryland, and I grew up on a little town on the Eastern Shore, and my dream was to always be a fashion designer and move to the city. So I kind of that was always something I wanted to do. So I studied apparel design at Radford University, and then I moved to New York after I graduated.
Well, my passion for fashion started back when I was a kid. My dad, he was like one of the first black national sales rep for Reebok. So he took me to all the trade shows, the magic shows that were out in California, Vegas area, and went to all like the department stores. So at a young age, I definitely loved like vintage and like stuff like his own personal collection from like back in like the 60s, 70s. And then also just traveling with him and going to all the different department stores across the East Coast definitely sparked the interest. That's kind of how I got I was born into it.
Well, I started the brand in 2012 doing just upcycled jewelry. 2013, I met you, and we combined our talents and then opened our store on Chincoteague in 2014. A few years in, about 3 years in, we bought the bus.
About 2-3 years in, we bought the bus, and a lot of, it's a tourist-based destination island. It's not on the way to anything, so a lot of customers were coming from all over, from like California, Richmond, DC, New York, and they were always like, you know, like, you guys are really in the middle of nowhere, like, you guys need to come to us.
I wanted to buy the bus because it allowed us to be able to go away when our business was seasonal. We could then go away the rest of the year and still be able to target our customers. And then so every time we would come to Richmond, to VCU, it was great. And we always had so much support. People were really excited. And so every time we would leave, you know, we'd be here for just a few days and then go back or go to Virginia Tech or wherever. And we'd be like, maybe we should be in Richmond.
With round two, their name is, you know, a second chance pretty much at clothing and shoes. You know, come bring it here, you know, if you want to really get rid of it and get, you know, the right amount of cash for it that you deserve. And this way, you know, someone will make use of the item that you're, you know, either done with or don't want to wear, or they're just collecting dust. So this gives it another second go for someone else to enjoy the item that you aren't maybe anymore. Round two, established 2013 by the three owners, Sean, Chris, and Luke. They, you know, met through the grapevines of each other, whether they knew a friend of a friend, and then, you know, they came down to Richmond all on their own, and just, you know, one thing led to another. You know, they like the same things, you know, old stuff, you know, memorabilia, nostalgia, all of that, and just, we're like, I think we can make something out of this. They got the city of Richmond on their back. They, good little following, posting through Instagram all day, every day, you know, treating the customers right, the people right, giving back to the community, and, you know, till this day, you know, we're still blessed to have the customer base that still come here, still enjoy us, you know. They've come and gone. I think me and the fellows right here are holding it down. So, I mean, I'm enjoying every day of this, so I love it here. Me personally, started a while back. I used to go to community college down the street, and then I did go to VCU. A lot in the meantime, you know, after my studies or even before, I did a lot of thrifting. When I quit my old job, I did it for a minute, 6 days a week, you know, just going hard, you know, just flipping stuff, coming to the shop, you know, at least twice a week, and seeing the homies that I see now every day. Yeah, just finding unique stuff in the thrifts and then shopping here. It's a good little mixture of stuff that you don't see at the mall, so it's very unique. I got the job here early 2016, so I've been here about 3.5 years. I love it. I did go to VCU, 10 classes away from graduating, just, you know, 5 classes and I'm being 3, 2, 1, then 0, and, you know, I just could never enjoy myself, you know. Like everybody else was in the class, they were just so excited to be there, and I was like, I'm really not excited to be here. And I knew I was excited to be in the shop, you know, doing what I love.
Kind of, though, the way we broke up the shop was then each brand could do whatever they wanted in their own space, but then it still needed to feel cohesive. And so I think that's kind of like was my role, was like, all right, well, if we could put, you know, I mean, Derek and I obviously work together on everything, but like, you know, if we could put certain, you know, brands in certain places, like how would it flow? And, you know, having like the plants against the wall, like that was like a good idea. And I mean, everyone has kind of like contributed to their space. But like, it's, like I said, kind of an evolution because it's just ever changing. I kind of think the name, like Reunion, is kind of a sense of like all these different people from different places, but it's like a family reunion.
But as far as thrifting, that's May Merced's thing. Like, they got the connects on like just vintage and repurposing clothes, and I'm a designer, so bringing my ideas with their talent is perfect, fits right. Being that my brand was like new generation and a streetwear at that, the collaborations only felt right with just different aspects and different things to make my brand branch out in different avenues. We did from jean jackets to bomber jackets to college jackets. But our next project going to be pants. It's going to be crazy. We got a lot of things that I got to keep secret though.
So definitely Sean, of all three of the owners, is huge into 80s and 90s nostalgia. Just a lot of Space Jam, a lot of Michael Jordan, and in contrast, we sell a lot of Air Jordans, so it kind of makes it go hand in hand. Very cool aesthetic, You see something different. We have that Jordan memorabilia wall. I see something new every day. It's just very cool, like what they did back then compared to now.
I walked in, the atmosphere, it was pretty nice. This was back when they was about a few blocks down, their first spot, and it was real nice. There was a lot of people in there, and that was surprising because it was 9 o'clock on a Saturday. I know this back when Sean and Chris were actually in the shop, and I walked in, I'm just looking around, like, okay, first time I've been in the actual shoe store, now that I'm actually into shoes. And then I seen some metallic 5s, and I tried them on. They fit great, they look great, and it was like maybe $90 or like $100. Like, okay, I gotta get these right now. Yeah. So I talked my mom into buying them for me, and so that was my first experience with them. After that, it was really a routine, maybe week after week after week. Me going around too, getting different jerseys, different hoodies, just depending on what I was seeing that day. I think I might buy these right now. Yeah, might have to walk out with them.
The thought, or in us carrying out the ability to open these new stores, especially our New York one. New York rent is not cheap. It is where the big boys play. So for us to make it out there in Los Angeles too, that's crazy. To compete with the big stores like Flight Club and Riff and stuff like that. So that we were able to come out of little Richmond, Virginia, and do it like that. I think I'm at my peak, and I'm performing the best of my ability. A lot of obstacles come in the way, but I just like to stay here as long as I can, and be happy. My time will be up soon, so who knows when that'll be.
Having the store here has kind of put us in like the big leagues, I feel like, where we were doing all these things prior and we've been working so hard, but like our customer, we only could get to see them like one time if they came on vacation, one time at the music festival. Now we're getting to build these relationships with customers that are coming in.
Keeping up with the demand, being like a small business, we don't have our own manufacturing. So with that, it presents a lot of challenges because we're only 2 people, so we're only able to like bang out X amount of things, and we don't want to charge like crazy prices for stuff.
So now we're looking like we need to really assemble a team. I need to hire not just a person to work the front. I need a team, which is actually so amazing that VCU is right here. So we're actually utilizing fashion design and merchandising interns, which I hope will then maybe we could then get some hire some designers. I feel like we make a good team, and I think that's an important thing.
But it's also a challenge.
Yeah. Oh, look now. Of course it is. It's never gonna be just easy.
But yeah. I think.
I'm Bill Oglesby, an associate professor in VCU's Robertson School of Media and Culture and the instructor for the documentary class. Joining me tonight are Christina Archer, Matthew Pittman, and Aviance Hawks, who produced the Thrifted documentary. I enjoyed that. Matthew, let me start with you. What inspired you to actually choose these 2 thrift stores to sort of focus on in this doc?
Yeah, so we really wanted the thrift stores in Richmond all have different focuses, is what we noticed in our research when deciding who we wanted to focus on. round 2 was the most popular, so obviously we had to definitely get in on them, considering how their sneaker resale. And Mammorsas was actually somewhere Aviance found, and we liked how they were all about sustainability and taking clothes and creating it into something else. So just having those two things together just seemed like a right fit.
Mm-hmm. Of course, people always have lots of stories about team projects. Christina, what was it like collaborating on such a big project for the first time?
Honestly, well, the three of us have actually known each other for the past 2 years. We've worked together multiple times, and we're all friends outside of this, so it was really simple to get our ideas together and work through it efficiently.
Mm-hmm. And you're still friends now that it's over?
Yes,
right?
of course. Like, it may have been some butted heads, but at the end of the day, we couldn't have done it without each other.
Good, that's the important part. Aviance, what do you think, the whole subject of thrifting, which seems like almost like a subculture in itself, where's that headed in the future?
I think thrifting's gonna be around just forever. It's like thrift stores are prominent in a lot of cities, and I just feel like it's becoming more so a trend now. And it's like Richmond, for example, is like the base for like thrift culture and tattoos and all that other stuff. So people coming to VCU and attending the school, I feel like get hip. I don't know if anybody knows what that means, but get hip to thrift stores and are able to shop them regularly because they're on Broad Street and there's so many that you can choose from. And I feel like they're at an affordable price, and most people find something they like in a thrift store no matter what it is. So.
Okay. So what was your favorite part of creating the documentary? Let me ask one of you, and I don't care who takes it.
I think my favorite part was getting all the video, like the B-roll, and being able to meet the people and get different clips and pick them out and pick and choose because we had so many to choose from. Yep. It was more so, it was challenging, but it was fun to do.
Okay.
For me, at least.
Great job. All right, well, I've been speaking with Robertson School students and documentary producers Christina Archer, Matthew Pittman, and Aviance Hawks. Good job, folks.
Thanks, Dr. Oglesby. When people think of counterculture music and art in the 1970s and 80s, most associate it with the punk scenes of New York's Lower East Side or the straight-edge hardcore movement of Washington, D.C. However, Richmond has quite a unique history as well.
To have a perspective on what the counterculture in Richmond during the 70s and 80s had to offer is to seek out its remaining members who still reside here. Their stories are told in this classic documentary called River City Underground.
Hi, I'd like to see the Richard Bland flyer collection.
Sure.
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't get it at first. You know, I came to VCU wanting to be a hippie because I had older brother who was in the whole hippie thing, and I loved the hippies. I loved the Crosby, Stills and Nash and the Beatles and all that. And I went to a small private school where we had to keep our hair short, couldn't grow facial hair. And then I get to VCU, and suddenly everybody was into punk. And I didn't get it at first. It took a while for me to understand it. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? And I didn't get it. And then in Schaefer Court, people were throwing glass, you know, and I didn't get it. Then at some point or another, I was at some show and I started getting it. And then I started hanging out with some of the guys in some bands and I started getting it.
It wasn't like flipping a switch. I mean, rock became punk. Punk became a thing right around 76 or so when a few seminal bands appeared. But there were bands that were, you'd call them punk, even though nobody used that term. You know, before that in Richmond, there was a club that was just an old dive bar on Main Street. It's dorms now. It was right across the street from Monroe Park, and it was called Benny's. And it was just kind of a dump. It was just a dive bar with a really cool owner, and they would pack people in there. It was always just wild. And these were the punkiest bands in town played at Benny's. Iggy Pop played there one night. He was in town for a show he had done.
So we had Iggy Pop. We had like 3 or 4 bands before then. 40 kegs of beer had been imbibed. And he comes out, his eyes were bugged so wide open, like I don't know what he was on, you know. And he had this, it was almost like superhero muscles. I mean, like there was, every part of his body was muscular, but he's wearing stockings, you know, and I'm like, what am I seeing? So it was a cultural shock to me. And I couldn't even hear the music because I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, and it was right in front of me. And then the riots started, and then that became the focus of everything because they cut off the sound, and everybody started throwing beer cans and cinder blocks and chairs and all this stuff, and it turned into a riot. But hey, that's punk.
I came to Richmond in 1977, and I'll never forget, I'd been here 2 months. I came from a rural part of the state, so it was a culture shock for me to come here. But nothing prepared me for going to the 1977 VCU Halloween dance at the old gym on Franklin. The Ramones were playing that year. They didn't impact me as much as a band called Ricky and the White Boys, who led off. They were Richmond's first true punk band. I'd never seen anything like that before. Ralph Harper, lead singer, he was on the ground, he was growling, he was spitting, I'd never seen anything like it, I never heard anything like it or seen anything like it. I left that show a changed person. Not because of the Ramones, it was Ricky and the White Boys.
And the first time I ever saw slam dancing, we had these brick walls, and these guys are throwing each other against the walls. I grew up in the 70s in high school where this was dancing, you know, staying alive, right? Then you get in there and it's sweating and you're bouncing and you're moving around, and you're like, all right, this is all right, this is a good vibe.
And so there were just so many places to play. So there were just always bands happening. There were a few bands started to get national attention to some level. Bands from Richmond, Susie Saxon and the Anglos, The Good Guys, The Dads, 1010, House of Freaks, Single Bullet Theory. All of these had some sort of interest from record labels, and some actually had releases and got varying levels of attention.
But you want to talk about punk, and a lot can be debated about punk rock in Richmond and internationally. There was a band that played here for a while called the Degenerate Blind Boys. Now, if any band ever perfectly encapsulated the punk philosophy that was espoused by the Sex Pistols, it was the Degenerate Blind Boys. And Dickie Disgusting, the lead singer, the short, ugly, skinny punk kid. They were the ones who kicked the pumpkin full of fish guts into the crowd at Newgate Prison at a Halloween show and created a riot. They were terrible musicians, admittedly, but it was the persona that was created around them. But there was a riot right there at Newgate Prison too, and that drew the attention of the cops, and that you never want that to happen, because once the cops show up once, they'll show up forever. And eventually they'll drive you out, and that's what happened to Newgate.
I don't know, it seemed to us like there was a vendetta against the club and everything, and it's probably just our imagination. Like, they want the property, they're trying to run us out, because they were enforcing a lot of laws and sending like undercover cops in and stuff who weren't very undercover at all. I mean, we knew them by name. We'd ask them for IDs at the door, and they get mad and, man, here's my ID. Show their gun and stuff. Yeah, all right, man.
Everybody's job made them very little money, but they didn't have to have money because rent was so cheap. So we were this secret, you know. We were able to like get our career started here. My friend started booking shows. I did flyers for them. So, you know, I just was like, oh, I'll do a weird font and, you know, go flyer the campus and, you know, just turn in my hours. So it was a pretty slack job, and I got to doodle.
8.5 by 11 Xerox black and white flyers. And, you know, there was a whole flyer war thing going on in the 80s where, you know, people were tearing down each other's flyers, and there was like an etiquette involved, and people would screw up and do things they shouldn't do, and the city came around and took everybody's posters down.
The city would come along and burn them off because they got so thick. But they said it was basically vandalism or an eyesore law, that type of thing. And I was like, yeah, well, we're like third per capita in murder, and there's trash everywhere anyway, so these people are just trying to make a living. That's not, the flyers are not the problem.
The rest of Richmond said, you want to keep it right there on Gray Street around VCU, fine. And VCU got a reputation, VCU for a while stood for Viet Cong University, because people said, there's a bunch of communist hippies going there, but throughout, one thing too you have to realize about counterculture in Richmond is it was very individual based. It was the power of personalities that drove the counterculture back then.
VCU was like this little oasis in the middle of a Confederate city. There were all kinds of outlets for media. There were all kinds of little magazines going around.
Me and some friends from the Commonwealth Times had published some little one-shot publications. In January or December of 1980, we decided, well, let's do another one, but let's do a big one this time. And so we created the first Throttle. And what was so good about Throttle was that we were given a voice to these, and we were reviewing their shows. We were sending people, we were taking pictures. So people were seeing them and they were seeing the club. They're saying, whoa, look at what's going on in Richmond. We were helping each other by doing that. It was a great relationship for a while with the bands. But what goes up must come down. All of a sudden our ad base started crumbling. It was basically the volatility of the band scene.
Well, I've been through it personally. Rock and roll is not when you get there on that sort of level, it's not the job that you applied for. It's not what you thought it was.
Richmond is a hard place to leave. People leave to go do stuff outside of Richmond. They go to LA to try to make it big. It didn't work, so they came back. And it's such a good place to live, Richmond, that I think a lot of people don't want to leave. And so therein lies a conflict.
I mean, it was a ghost town. It was just boarded up, and it was crime, and nothing was open. No one wanted to be here, and so that is a perfect breeding ground for good art.
Other cities may have experienced something similar, but nothing was quite like Richmond's, I don't think. And it was really what started the RVA philosophy, I think.
It was something I'd always kind of wanted to see or be a part of.
Here was just wide open. If I saw one more documentary on DC, I'd want to vomit, because it's like, yeah, it's great. Everyone knows about that. But Richmond's about fun, art, experimentation. There's a long history of that. Richmond has such a great history. I just hope it continues.
I think it's just out and out, kiss my ass, we're doing something different. So it's awesome.
Well, that does it for this edition of VCU In Depth. Thank you for joining us. I'm Calvin Weinstein.
And I'm Autumn Wright. For all of us at VCU In Depth,